Now, good morning to everyone that has just joined us, and hello if you are watching the replay. Welcome to another one of our online learning webinars. This time it's all about the invasive invasion. Are our homes being overtaken? I'm your host, Andy Ferguson, and joining me this morning, I'm really pleased to welcome back my colleague, PC's Technical Manager, Daniel Dawkin. We are about to start the main presentation. Just for those that are just joining us, if you are looking to pose a question over the course of the webinar, first place I'd very quickly point you to is to the chat facility. Now, on the desktop, that'll be running down the left or the right-hand side. On a mobile device, it'll just be at the bottom. All you simply need to do is go to the comments, set up the comments box and type in your question. Equally, if you want to email your question to me direct, all you need to do is email it to andy@property-care.org. That's andy@property-care.org. Well, Daniel, I can see we are lovely jubbly bang on 9 o'clock. So, the invasive invasion. Are our homes being overtaken? Now, this whole webinar came about from us looking at recent stats showing that 50% of plants in Britain are now non-native. But just because 50% of plants are non-native doesn't make them invasive. So for the ones that are, how have these invasive plants spread and impacted our built environment? And it's largely due to us that's causing this problem. And if so, and I suppose whether you're a professional, surveyor, a gardener, a landscaper, or whoever, or even just a homeowner, what should we be considering when we come across them? Some big points there, Daniel, but hopefully you can come to answer them. And I suppose over to yourself, good sir.
Yes, exactly. Some big points there. So hopefully we will see some answers as we move forward. So welcome everyone to the Invasive Invasion. We're going to start going through the webinar, and I hope you enjoy it. So first off, we have to understand what is an INS. So to put it very simply, it's an invasive non-native species, refers to any organism that is introduced into an ecosystem outside of its natural range, and it has the potential to cause harm to the environment, economy, or health. There's a lot of long words there. It really doesn't define too much, but as we progress with it, we tend to understand that these species are typically introduced by human activities, such as intentional or accidental releases, transportation of goods, or escape from captivity. So when we talk about what is an INS, an invasive non-native species can include plants, animals, insects, fungi, microorganisms. So it's a really wide array of stuff which it can affect. But when introduced into a new ecosystem, they often lack natural predators, competitors, or diseases that would typically regulate their population in their native habitats. As a result, they can rapidly reproduce and spread, outcompeting native species. As much as obviously our focus will be on plants, I think for everyone to see, the most common INS which we see nowadays is actually the grey squirrel, to the point where probably many people believe that that's normal and that's natural within the UK. I know for a fact I had an interesting conversation with my kids not too long ago, trying to explain to them the difference between a red and a grey squirrel. So it's sort of stuff like that which has almost become natural for us. So when we talk about INS, we've got to look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. Not every non-native plant is bad, and this sort of stuff which we really got to understand. So the good. So studies have indicated that plants like Himalayan balsam, other INS, they bloom late within the season. This allows a great source of late pollen and nectar, and that helps with obviously our own dwindling bumblebee population. So sort of as much as we know Himalayan balsam is to be bad, actually good parts which come with it as well. And obviously we all know what Japanese knotweed is, but Japanese knotweed and other plants do have natural medicinal properties, which can be utilised in homemade remedies. So sort of stuff like that, once again, is really interesting to see, because that's actually quite a good side to it. once again, not some non-native plants were sort of brought in, like grapeseed, was introduced into the UK, and it now provides a large economic boost through the agricultural farming. So once again, another non-native plant, but one which actually does fantastic to the UK, the economic UK. But of course, there is the bad side to some of the invasive non-natives. So many plants like bamboo, for example, can create this sort of mono-dominant society. And it really restricts the capability of other plants being able to grow. Sort of as you can see in the picture here, you've got these stems, or these culms, I should say, of bamboo, and there's very little which is going to be able to grow sort of underneath it. We have seeding plants like giant hogweed, or once again, Himalayan balsam. They can rapidly spread, making large infestations extremely hard to manage. Sort of one plant can produce hundreds of seeds. Them seeds are all viable, and suddenly them hundreds of seeds produce seeds themselves. So it can escalate very, very quickly. So it's really, really important sort of that we manage sort of seeding plants. Obviously, they cause problems to the wider environment. Obviously, we are focusing today on the built environment. However, especially sort of when they get along sort of waterways and sort of forestries, river erosion, rhododendron within forest, it can lead to a very wide environmental impact. So we've got to be really, really understanding of that. And of course, the ugly. Well, how can it get much worse? Well, we could come back to Japanese knotweed. We wouldn't be talking about inns within the built environment without it. It obviously caused a massive property blight, sort of around about in the early noughties, which led to lending restrictions from financial institutions, diminishment of value, which we still see today, and obviously much, much more. So you have neighbours sort of suing each other over sort of common law regards to encroachment, misrepresentation on the TA6 form. So it can get quite ugly with regards to that. We have plants like, once again, bamboo, can penetrate building weaknesses, foundations, it can lift pavement slabs, or buddleia, as we see, can penetrate brickwork, and both result in financial burdens for their remediation. And of course, as we all know, these invasive plants, they respect no boundaries. They will quite happily jump from one side to the next, whether they are seeding, whether they are spreading via rhizome. Quite often, if it's anywhere near a boundary, it will jump across. So what it does is forces all affecting property owners or neighbours to participate in their remediation. Otherwise, reinfestation is highly likely. And that can be a challenge in itself. Not all neighbours want to sort of get involved in this type of remediation because of the financial burdens, or maybe they're just not bothered. So that in itself can be a real challenge to deal with any invasive non-native plants. So obviously why we're here today is we're going to identify some of the inns which can have a significant impact specific to the built environment. Once again, there are many invasive non-native plants. However, not all of them have the same type of impact to the buildings or our homes. Some have a wider environmental impact. So this is what we're going to focus on today. So who are the main culprits and what damages can they bring? Of course, as I said before, we wouldn't be here without Japanese knotweed. And I can't ignore it, can I? So as we know, it can penetrate pre-existing damage. Obviously, when we talk about knotweed, there is this old story about how it can penetrate straight through concrete. We do know that is a slight exaggeration, but it can penetrate pre-existing damage, potentially lift pavement slabs or create other hard landscape damage. It's a large amount of rhizome, also of energy stores. So realistically, cutting it down just doesn't work. It will just keep on growing and growing and growing. Same as if you're trying to put tarp all over the top of it. It has a very large sort of energy reserve. So it's just going to keep coming up. And obviously, if you do get that crown material, it is extremely dense. So what tends to happen, that crown material grows and grows. It puts pressures onto walls, brickwork, and that's what leads to that sort of catastrophic collapse. And obviously it spreads really, really easily. So we tend to say, so around about a thumbnail worth of rhizome has a capability to spread. The stem material can also spread itself. It's a little less likely to spread via the stem material itself. It takes a little bit more of a perfect storm type scenario for it to spread via the stem. However, it is still possible. However, the rhizome itself, that's the main way it spreads. And obviously, as we all know, possible mortgage retention to homeowners, financial institutions are still very wary about lending on properties with Japanese knotweed, despite the new RICS guidance, which come out March last year, which changed the focus, but they are still very, very wary about lending on properties. So let's have a look at some of the damage it can do within this sort of built environment. So sort of in the first picture, as you can see, Japanese knotweed coming up internally. What happened here was a builder decided to build a brand new extension directly on top of a stand of Japanese knotweed. And it didn't go anywhere apart from straight back up. Once again, here we see some Japanese knotweed popping up sort of in amongst some tarmac. Once again, same situation, straight on top of the Japanese knotweed stand. As we said before, once again, putting sheeting down, sort of stuff like that doesn't stop it from growing up. AstroTurf, once again, straight up through the middle. And this was a fantastic one, actually. This was a homemade foundation built for a garage. I mean, as you can see, it's sort of not in good quality at all. Sort of within sections underneath there was actually a part of a motorbike as well. So it was a very poor attempt. However, once again, it was built directly on top of a Japanese knotweed stand, and the knotweed just comes straight back through again. So obviously, what type of considerations should a professional or sort of surveyor, what should they consider? With knotweed, obviously, don't ignore the problem. Once again, this type of stuff, which not only a professional surveyor should be looking at, but what type of information they potentially give back to their clients as well. So once again, just don't ignore the problem, especially not with knotweed. Try to understand the risks and the potential amenity value loss with the plant within its current location. Obviously, we have the RICS professional standard, so use it if applicable. And obviously suggests seeking a specialist opinion. There are roughly sort of 100 PCA accredited Japanese knotweed specialists. So it's sort of really, really important that we sort of seek their opinion, seek their guidance. Once again, they will be able to help sort of evaluate some of the risks associated with the plant within its current location. So as a homeowner, what can we consider? What should we be thinking about? Once again, I reiterate, don't ignore the problem. We know it's only going to get worse, so do not ignore the problem. Understand your duty is to ensure this plant doesn't spread. So whether that's spread into the wild, as we tend to say, or even spread into neighbouring properties, it is your responsibility to make sure the plant doesn't spread. It's not illegal to have Japanese knotweed. I do want to make that very clear. You're completely fine to have it on your land. However, you do have a duty to ensure that this plant doesn't spread. So as a homeowner, are you intending to develop the area? Are you going to be putting an outbuilding? Is there a conservatory, a summer house, an extension, where the Japanese knotweed stand is? That's a real big consideration, because if you are, then it's unlikely that you're going to be able to sort of manage it yourself. Are you selling? Are you remortgaging? And do you require a specialist IBG plan to make sure the financial institutions are happy? And of course, especially when it comes down to Japanese knotweed, seek a specialist opinion. Once again, as I said before, they have a wider range of knowledge and sort of expert experience. So really, it's really important to sort of seek their opinion. So I want to move on to something else now. So very, very similar to Japanese knotweed, we do have bamboo. This is one which we're starting to see a lot more nowadays, and it's really, really interesting. So very, very much like Japanese knotweed, it can penetrate pre-existing damage. It can lift pavement slabs and create other hard landscape damage. The similarities between bamboo and Japanese knotweed are sort of astounding. Once again, we always talk about Japanese knotweed having bamboo type canes. Both of them are rhizome plants, so it's sort of the similarities are there. Once again, it has large rhizomes and it's sort of energy stored, so simply cutting it down just won't get rid of it. The rhizomes on bamboo are a lot more fibrous than Japanese knotweed. With Japanese knotweed, we tend to say sort of it's quite clean, snaps like a carrot. However, with bamboo, they're extremely fibrous. So digging them out, trying to snap them by hand can be very, very hard. Especially with bamboo, we tend to see that they have a small waxy leaf, which severely restricts herbicide effectiveness. So as much as with Japanese knotweed, we can come through and we spray because it has nice big leaves, and with bamboo, it's very, very different. We can come through and spray, however, the herbicide effectiveness is just not the same as it is with other plants, especially when you've got some quite tall stands of bamboo. Potentially sort of 4, 5, 6 meters sort of up in the air. Trying to spray stands like that is extremely hard, especially sort of sometimes you may need some specialists working at height equipment in order to make sure that you can sort of get up that high and spray safely. So dense colonies of culms or sort of canes also means cutting it down is extremely labor intensive. So if you're going to be going through with like a hedge cutter or anything like that, you may need to get your blade sharpened afterwards, but doing it by hand, once again, is extremely labor intensive. So this is something which we don't see so much with Japanese knotweed. It's sort of overall it's quite easy to cut down. Bamboo kind of takes what we know and really to a certain point takes it to the next level. Something which we've got to be really, really cautious about, especially when we are cutting down these culms as well. They can produce small splinters sort of as you're cutting it down, which can lead to obviously getting in your eye and sort of stuff like that. So you've got to be really, really careful when you are, or if you are going to be cutting down any culms of bamboo. So once again, what type of damage can bamboo do to the built environment? Yeah, I don't need to explain that one too much. So obviously you can see bamboo has encroached in the house. No, that's not a fake plant, which is just poked behind sort of a door and coming through. That is actually bamboo coming through the floorboards on the other side and coming up and coming through. This is the rhizome which we're talking about. So once again, as you can see there, directly sort of underneath the pavement slabs, sort of quite thick. You can see sort of it's sort of lifting them slabs and the damage which it can do when you start to lift these out. And another fine example of these roots sort of spreading out. As you see in this picture, sort of the tarmac is sort of underneath that tarmac and it's sort of lifting about all over the place. This is for me is absolutely astounding, just to be able to see sort of how strong these roots are. And just sort of lift everything up, and just a little bit more of a close-up, sort of what the type of damage can do, sort of to tarmac sort of type areas. So, what type of considerations from a professional surveyor's point of view? Sort of what should we be looking at? So, is it currently a problem? And I think for me, this is really key to understand with every single plant sort of within someone's property. Under no circumstances do we want to start demonizing every plant. Bamboo is a fantastic screener, providing it's kept correctly. It doesn't need to be a problem. So sort of we start to assess and we start to ask ourselves, is it currently a problem? Is it causing damage like we've seen in the last previous pictures, or is it contained and not doing anything? Is it likely to affect the amenity value of the property? And I talk about amenity value because this plant is so similar to Japanese knotweed. In my opinion, we should be taking this sort of a similar approach of understanding how it can affect this sort of amenity value. So is it coming up within the grass lawn? Is it stopping you from using your flower beds? Is it restricting you from being able to use your home? So that's one question sort of we've got to be asking ourselves. So have or can a homeowner realistically implement measures to stop it from becoming a problem? So once again, looking at these plants, this is not on a Schedule 9. So homeowners can sort of cut it down themselves. They can try to be remediating themselves, and that's completely fine. However, can they realistically do it? Is it already got too big and sort of too out of control? So obviously, if there is any doubt, we would suggest seeking to a specialist. As we said, the similarities between bamboo and knotweed are sort of astounding. So a lot of sort of knotweed companies have this experience to be able to deal with bamboo quite easily. So from a homeowner, what should we be considering? So once again, we come back to this sort of thing. Is it currently a problem, or is it likely to become a problem in the near future? This is sort of stuff which we've got to be asking ourselves. Is your garden maintenance helping to control it, or is it making it worse? So sort of, are we sort of generally trimming it, making sure it's sort of kept nice and tidy? Are we doing stuff to make sure that it's staying contained within its intended environment? Or sort of, are what we're doing, digging it, moving it around and stuff, actually going to make it worse? And obviously, have appropriate measures been taken to ensure the plant doesn't spread outside of its target area? So when we talk about appropriate measures, especially for bamboo, is it within a container? Have you put any root barriers down to stop it from spreading? Is it away from a property or a neighbouring boundary? And what can we do just to make sure that it doesn't spread from where we want it as a homeowner? If you haven't done it already, can you do it? Is it easy enough to be able to sort of, once again, just be able to put a little root barrier down, or is it easy enough to sort of pick it up and move it away from a neighbouring property, a neighbouring boundary, I should say? And have you tried to manage it already? Was you successful? Once again, we always encourage people, especially sort of with invasive plants, don't ignore the problem. So are you already trying to manage the plant? And if you are, kind of, is it getting worse, and is it getting worse? And sort of, if you do you need specialist advice on how to manage it moving forward? But yeah, I know this one is probably going to split decisions, but within the built environment, it can cause quite a lot of problems. So can penetrate tiny cracks within brickwork and begin to grow. I think we've all been walking down the road or driving down the road, looked up and seen plants growing out of brickwork, pretty much out of absolutely nothing, 3-4 stories up. The likelihood that is probably going to be bad. How it does it is absolutely outstanding, but this is the type of problem which it can cause. It can potentially produce thousands of seeds per plant, which can be widespread due to the wind. You imagine 3 stories up, thousands of seeds being produced and just being windswept. The distance which it can cover, once again, is absolutely astounding, especially sort of in these sort of built-up environments where you have sort of mid-terrace properties and you have hundreds of properties within a row. It can just go from one to the next, to the next, to the next. So it's really, really important we sort of understand, especially sort of that type of stuff. And sort of, as we said earlier, it's often located in difficult to access areas. resulting in specialist equipment required, whether it's sort of getting a MUP or whether it's getting long access equipment. It can be really hard to manage buddleia within certain areas. And this is a really interesting one, actually, because this leads into other sections as well. So dense bushes, especially sort of within sort of cracks, can retain moisture, resulting in damp or mold within the building. Obviously, there has been a massive highlight and talk about sort of damp and mold within buildings. And I have seen it myself where buddleia is climbing in throughout the wall, on the wall. And because it is retaining that moisture, there is that sort of damp which is coming through. So that's a really, really interesting one, which you may not necessarily associate with plants as well. So as we can see, some of the damage here, sort of buddleia sort of just ripping through some brickwork. The first image obviously is an unmaintained building, so I sort of completely respect that. If you manage the building, it probably wouldn't be too much of an issue. However, the second image here, this is actually a maintained mid-terrace building. It managed to sort of get in amongst some of the rendering. It got underneath, and as you can see, it just started tearing through the brickwork. And this is a sort of a follow-on from that. This is actually the same properties. So what happened is the buddleia went from the building and it sort of just shifted off over to the side into a brick boundary wall. And sort of, as you can see, kind of it's big, mature, and it really starts to cause problems. And this is not uncommon with buddleia if it can get into brickwork. And as you can see within the first picture, once it's in that brickwork, everything then starts to move, which is where you're going to have problems as well. So what should we be considering, again, from a professional surveyor's point of view? Do we come back to this sort of, is it currently a problem, or is it within brickwork? Once again, we're not demonizing buddleia. It does fantastic things for sort of butterflies, which is why it's known as being the butterfly bush. So we're not going to demonize it. However, is it currently a problem where it is? If it's at the back of the garden, no problems whatsoever. If it's already within the brickwork, then it currently is a problem. Is it likely to spread into nearby brickwork or neighbouring properties? So once again, we're sort of assessing it. We're trying to associate the risks with it and where it is. And can a homeowner safely implement measures to stop it from becoming a problem? So as a professional, we're looking at this plant and going, well, it's away from the building. It's on ground level, so the homeowner should realistically be able to manage this plant, no problem whatsoever. So from a professional point of view, it doesn't really raise much of a concern. However, if you flip that round and you turn around and say, well, it's on the third floor and it's coming out of the brickwork, how is that homeowner going to be able to stop that from becoming even more of a problem? And as a homeowner, what should we be considering? What should we be thinking about? We come back to this again, risk assessment. Is it currently a problem, or is it likely to become a problem? Is it located within the brickwork or near the brickwork? And once again, is it within an accessible area which you're able to manage safely? And if not, do you need specialist advice or equipment? And this is a little bit extra. So this is not exactly non-native. This is sort of almost prehistoric. It's been sort of all around the world since the dinosaurs. So we are going to talk about horsetail. So take this as a little bonus tip, because I don't think you can get away with talking about invasive plants in the built environment without mentioning horsetail or mare's tail, whatever you want to call it. And obviously, we know it can penetrate through tarmac, paving slabs, and other hard landscape features. I'll get there in the end. So it's not going to have the same type of potential damage which Japanese knotweed can do, which bamboo can do, which buddleia can do. It's not going to get in amongst your brickwork. It's not going to sort of penetrate any weaknesses within a foundation. This is going to be a little bit more of aesthetic damage in and around your garden. it has this sort of what we call a waxy outer layer, which severely restricts herbicide effectiveness. Horsetail is a bane of gardeners' life. It's a bane of many sort of invasive weed specialists as well. It is extremely hard to manage. And it is, exactly as we say, it's a prolific seeder as well. So let's look at what it can do. So, I mean, as you can see within the first picture here, there is an absolute blanket of horsetail just because it spreads so easily. And this sort of situation here, what the individual was doing was sort of just coming through and just trimming the whole area, which would actually make it worse in the long term. So sort of after a couple of years of trying to self-manage, of cutting everything down, this is sort of obviously where he called us in to try and help. As we can see here, once again, up against this boundary fence, as we sort of spoke about earlier, with inns, they are prolific for jumping between boundary fences and sort of stuff like that. So once again, popping up and emerging. And once again, sort of in this final picture, what you can see is the sort of horsetail emerging in and around, and then it's sort of coming up and starting to come across in and amongst the paving slabs as well. So considerations from a professional or surveyor's point of view, what should we be looking at? So once again, we look at this sort of, is it currently a problem? Is it likely to cause a problem in the near future? Is it likely to affect the amenity value of the property? Can a homeowner realistically implement measures to stop it from becoming a problem? As a homeowner, once again, is it currently a problem? Is your general garden sort of maintenance making the problem worse? So if you're just trimming it down, trying to cut it down, are you making it worse? It's highly likely that you are. Have you tried to manage the plant already? Was it successful, or do you need specialist advice? And just in summary, I think sort of a lot of the key points which we spoke about before is not necessarily about sort of managing this sort of understanding the plant. So what should a professional surveyor do if they come across inns, or what can they talk to their client about? And with any inns plant, the thing which we have to understand is we have to assess the risk associated with the plant, try to establish if there is a risk the plant could cause any future problems to the structural integrity of the property or nearby hard landscape features. So sort of as we spoke about earlier, we're not here to demonize plants. Buddleia is a lovely plant. Bamboo is a fantastic screener. Providing that we keep these plants within their intended areas, they can be lovely. We have plants like Rhododendron ponticum, which I actually done a blog about quite recently. A fantastic garden ornamental plant. However, it is spreading through forestries like absolute wildfire at this point in time because it's escaped this intended environment. So what we should be looking at is how we are going to sort of calculate these risks and how we're going to associate them with the plant in its specific location. So obviously, if there is a potential risk, this should be noted to the client, and at the very minimum, obviously give the advice of seeking a specialist. Once again, we come back down to this sort of Buddleia situation. It's away from the building, it's within the ground, it's being managed, it's being maintained. It's not a risk. You can turn around and say to your client, look, maybe you should be aware of it. This plant has got potential to spread and potentially cause damage within the brickwork and building. However, it's completely fine at this point in time. So, why don't we get to the root of the problem? Yes, I do have a few puns in here, which you'll hopefully laugh at, probably not. So what is the root of the problem? So we've got to understand how these plants spread. And obviously, as Andy touched on a little bit earlier, a recent study from Plant Atlas in 2020 identified that over 50% of flora within the UK is now classified as non-native. But these plants are not all invasive, and I really want to make that clear. And once again, we're not demonizing every plant. We're not demonizing every non-native plant. We know that there are some good parts to non-native plants. However, many of them have the capability to become invasive, and this is where we've got to understand. These plants do not have the natural predators to keep them in check. So what tends to happen, they come into our environment and our natural equilibrium gets unbalanced. And this is where they become invasive and take over. So the question is, why are there so many non-native plants within the UK? Yep, it's us. I'm 100% putting the blame on humans. We are the problem. But why are we the problem? So there's a couple of ways which we can break this down. So professionals, obviously, the root of the problem. Garden centres, oh, yes. Garden centres and nurseries are still actively selling plants listed on the Wildlife Countryside Act and other potential invasive plants without offering advice on how to manage. For example, we have bamboo being sold without any advice on maybe planting in pots, or any type of root barrier protection. We have rhododendrons, once again, being planted and being offered. We have Virginia creeper, once again, for example, on the Wildlife Countryside Act, however, still being sold in garden centres. And we do have mislabeled invasive varieties. So one example is Gunnar tinctoria being mislabeled as mandicata. Once again, we have various versions of rhododendrons which are being mislabeled as well. So this is actually quite common, and it's really, really important we sort of understand these plants which we're bringing in. And we spell on to sort of developers and sort of stuff like that. So incorrect management, removal, or even sort of biosecurity at the initial development phase, which has caused a full site spread of the invasive plant. Sort of, as you can see the image here, bits of knotweed sort of popping up in a little bit of a mound next to a track. So we tend to find that sort of in these circumstances that sometimes sort of it just spreads really easily like that. This sort of poor professional attitude of, oh, it's just a plant, I can dig that out myself, as we showed in the Japanese knotweed picture, how a builder just literally put an extension on top of a stand and it can spread through. So this sort of poor attitude can sometimes sort of take control. And this is sort of a really, really interesting one. So potentially invasive plants being used in landscaping schemes. So we have plants like cherry laurel, Japanese rose. Japanese rose is actually Schedule 9 plant. Cherry laurel is a very invasive plant and actively being used in landscaping schemes despite their invasive capabilities. So this is sort of a really, really interesting one, which we see a lot still. For homeowners, where's the root of the problem here? This sort of lack of education and understanding when selecting plants to be used within our homes. A lot of the time we just go to the home-based B&Q garden centre and we go, oh, that looks nice, and we take it and go to put it in our gardens without understanding how to truly manage the plant. We introduce plants into our gardens with unrestricted access or in areas where they can easily spread outside of their intended environment. And so once again, we come back to this whole rhododendron problem currently, especially sort of in Scotland. This is where the main sort of pandemic is for that. Plant on the edge of a woodland or a heathland, it spreads rapidly, and the next thing you know, sort of it's taken over. So just once again, understanding these plants a little bit better. Or sort of no annual maintenance to help control the plants from spreading. So we have these plants and it's fantastic, but can we trim them down, make sure that they're not spreading? And possibly the main reason why it didn't spread, fly tipping. And I'm putting this down as homeowners because if fly tipping is being done, it's not being done by a professional, let's be totally honest. So it's really, really important that sort of if we are sort of getting rid of plants and sort of stuff like that, then we make sure we use professionals to get rid of it. Make sure that they have got waste carriers license, make sure that we are fully aware of sort of everything which is going on and where it's going. So as we spoke about earlier, not all plants are a problem. Acknowledging that some non-native plants have the potential to become invasive, we also must understand in what capacity this damage can be produced. We understand that Japanese knotweed and sort of bamboo and sort of stuff like that impacts the built environment, but there are also wider environmental impacts. Plants like Rhododendron ponticum, Gunnera tunctoria, they may have sort of limited capacity to actually produce a problem within the built environment. They're probably unlikely to cause any problems, structural problems or to hard landscape features. However, they have the opportunity to spread into forests, along waterways or other similar habitats. The results can be absolutely devastating. You see in the image to the side, that is Gunnera giant rhubarb, and that is just a massive field of it, because it was just allowed to spread and spread and spread. So we are still looking at this sort of wider impacts. On average, it's estimated to cost 1.8 billion per year to manage invasive plants, affecting agriculture, forestry, horticulture, utilities, construction, and pretty much everything else as well. So for example, Himalayan balsam and other riverside plants are known to exaggerate the erosion of riverbanks, leading to a loss of habitat, increased sediment deposit along the riverbeds. So once again, it's not just our homes to the problem. It goes a lot wider than this. Oh yes, how to stem the spread. So future considerations. We've established not all non-native plants are bad. However, we've got to be a little bit more proactive with these measures. What can we do? So what actions can we consider? So further education. For choosing plants for the home, conduct a little bit of research and increase your understanding of the plant. Understand the needs and the capabilities of the plant before we select it. So go out, read the label on the plant, understand where it can and can't grow and the likelihood of it potentially spreading. To talk about further education, there is lots of free literature from the Property Care Association, from the Royal Horticultural Society, RHS, from the Non-Native Species Secretariat, especially on invasive plants. So jump onto all of these websites and get some of this free literature. So professionals, if you're looking to become a CSJK, you just want to brush up on the other invasives, the PCA, we do have a plethora of courses. So whether that's knotweed, invasive woody shrubs, bamboos, invasive plant identification as a whole, which actually is live now, or we do have a brand new herbaceous invasive perennial weeds course, which is coming out later on this year. As a professional, if you're offering advice or you're just a garden enthusiast, homeowner, we do have a dedicated page on the invasive weed control. It's absolutely fantastic. We also do have a guidebook available to purchase. This is, once again, another brilliant product. You can be out in the field and sort of identify these plants, and it sort of gives you guidance of when they spread and when you may be able to see them. So a few things we can do as well to encourage native planting. If we're going to go to the garden centre to pick some plants, can we consider native over non-native or potentially invasive plants? So, for example, purple heather is an excellent replacement for rhododendron, in my opinion. Also, in wildflower mixes can be another fantastic introduction, which requires sort of low maintenance, but really, really encourages the biodiversity. So we really should consider other native plants. But if not, and we want to sort of choose some of these plants, then what other precautions can we take? So, for example, with bamboo, is it within a large suitable pot? If it's in the ground, can it have a root barrier? So just taking these precautions to make sure it doesn't spread. If budding is your desired plant, can it be planted away from established buildings? Can we stop it from seeding? If containing the spread doesn't work, what can we do? So obviously we completely remove the plant. However, be a little bit cautious depending on the plant, because if the plant is listed on the Wildlife Countryside Act, it shouldn't be going into the garden waste. Obviously engage with your neighbours or action groups to ensure that it doesn't spread even further. And obviously don't ignore the issue. So even if you're unable to do it by yourself, consider using a professional who are accredited in this contractor. They understand the invasive plants and they'll take on that responsibility of controlling or eradicating them. And whether that's from a homeowner point of view, where you're actively engaging them, or whether you're a professional and you're trying to provide this option and get people to seek specialist advice. And obviously we talk about a flowering industry. So the invasive invasion. We have already established a successful invasive weed sector driven by the necessity to combat the invasion of a single plant, Japanese knotweed. The very same expertise and knowledge has helped establish codes of practice, been involved with financial institutions, governmental debates. Many contractors have dealt with small domestic properties to large national infrastructure projects. So the knowledge and expertise is there. So for me, in summary, we are at fault for our own invasive invasion. However, we also have the capability to stem the spread, to get to the root of the problem and utilise the knowledge gained in the flowering industry to manage things within our built environment. Only then can we truly enjoy a wide selection of flora, which without damaging our homes and environment. Thank you very much for listening.
Oh, you almost caught me out there, Daniel. I was too busy looking at the chat and the questions there. You were quite quick on it. Well, firstly, Daniel, big thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise there. I think you pretty much answered exactly what I kind of thought. So we are the problem. It almost kind of feels like, just before we go into questions here from what you were actually saying, it almost kind of feels like we're digging a hole for ourselves and making life difficult with it being fueled with a lack of awareness about the impact of these plants. And I think if I'm quoting Catherine from the chat, I mean, she mentioned, isn't a case that we just need to start banging a drum with these garden centres to stop them from being irresponsible with regards to these problem plants?
Yes. I mean, this has stemmed for many, many years. If we go sort of back to the early noughties and we look at certain gardening programs, everything was put a bamboo screener down, put this down and put that down. And there was no consideration or there was no understanding of what you're going to be doing with that bamboo. I mean, they may have put them root barriers within the ground. You don't see that as someone who's just watching TV. But it comes from the media, it comes from garden centres. There's just a true lack of understanding and knowledge of these plants. And yeah, we've got to bang some drums with maybe pull back the old vuvuzelas. We've got to start making a lot of noise in order to make sure that people understand.
Goodness gracious, the vuvuzelas. I should say that word. But let's not go in a debate in that particular one. But yes, we absolutely agree with you, Catherine. And moving on, we're just going to go into questions just to let everyone know. This is your opportunity. If you do have a question, certainly feel free just to kind of pose it to us. You can either stick it into the chat if you're on desktop, left or the right hand side. If it's a mobile device, it's just at the bottom. Or if you want to email, it's andy@property-care.org. But very quickly moving on. So Daniel, I've got a wee kind of variety of questions. I'll try and group them into kind of similar themes. But I'm going to start off with bamboo, because I've got a wee mix of email questions here and questions stuck onto the chat. So I've got Karen McCall. Karen McCall's asking, regarding bamboo, is it crucial to ensure that the identification is right? I'm assuming what she means is the type of bamboo there. If so, what is the most important and most useful tips that you can give in order to identify the right species of bamboo? I'm guessing that she's looking for the most problematic ones.
Yeah, okay. So regards to bamboo sort of in itself, it can be quite complicated to sort of really identify the specific species. There are certain similarities which sort of overlap. What we tend to, realistically, we should be looking for is whether it's what we classify as a clumping bamboo or a running bamboo.
Okay.
That's just the characteristics of how they grow, whether the root system tends to sort of, once again, clump together and stay quite close, or whether it's one of these ones which just spread out rapidly and you can get sort of 7 meters worth of rhizome. That's realistic, probably better what you've got to try and understand. However, you can tend to find as well whether they are a clumping species, they can turn into a running species as well. And once again, same as running can turn into a clumping. So realistically, what we should be looking at is, to a certain point, taking everything with a pinch of salt, understanding that the damages potentially that the bamboo can do, and trying to sort of really sort of clump them together. If we are going to be looking at specific species, once again, you've got sort of golden bamboo, Tassa palmata. You've got a variety of plants there, all with the same sort of capabilities. Just the identification is slightly different, but the core principle of management, the core principle of risk is the same all the way through.
No, okay. Well, Tony Griffins, hopefully, just from what Daniel mentioned, you got your answer to your question. But I've got a wee kind of follow-up, and it's a personal question from myself here, Daniel. Just with you mentioning about bamboos and the types of bamboos that you mentioned there that were the most problematic. From those types that you mentioned, are those common ones that you pick up in your I don't want to say the brands, but your main kind of wholesalers, your DIY shops and garden centres? These are very, very common to purchase.
Yeah. To be honest, so sort of golden bamboo is extremely common. Because it does have a lovely sort of, exactly as I said, sort of golden colour to its culm as it matures. So it's very, very common to find, or what we tend to find is sort of black bamboo is another similar one. As it matures, the culms turn black, and it's quite different than sort of other ones. But it's the characteristics and the similarities of how they grow and how they spread is all the same. So realistically, they're all the same. They're just sort of identification can be, it just changes from one to the next.
Well, on that last point, you're talking about the same. One of the questions asked to us by Gavin Young was regarding the treatment methods for bamboo. Is it a similar process to Japanese knotweed?
Yes. So there are sort of a couple of ways which you can do it. Realistically, if you want to know the sort of ins and outs, I'm going to plug our bamboo course, because we do have one which we discuss the ins and outs of bamboo remediation. However, if you're going to be looking at doing it, if we're taking the same sort of principle of managing bamboo, managing knotweed as we do with bamboo. So spraying it may be a little bit difficult because it may be extremely tall, or it may have this sort of waxy leaves. So the herbicide intake is quite restricted. So a really, really good way of doing it is sort of cutting it down and maybe sort of trying to stem inject. However, that is, once again, extremely labour intensive as well. So just understand if you think you're going to be doing it it's a half an hour job, I can guarantee you it's probably going to turn into a 4-hour job if you're going to be cutting it down. In principle, it's the same sort of way, but we just sort of slightly change the time of the year as well. So we really go later on in the season, or obviously in the winter period, if you're going to be cutting it down, you can cut it down and stem inject at that point.
You know, bamboo is almost a plant that fascinates me, and I remember Jim Glaister, who's actually on the chat at the moment. Tim, good morning, Jim. Jim actually sent me across quite a few pictures of the rooting system underneath a particular property after they'd lifted up the slabs, and I was fascinated. I couldn't stop staring at it and how aggressive and how much there was of it. It literally was like veins through a skin, underneath all the slabs. It was incredible.
Yes, it really is. And Jim obviously runs the bamboo course, which you do for the PCA, so it's really knowledgeable when it comes to bamboo as well.
But anyway, sorry, moving on and asking more questions. I've got a wee question about Budleia here, and it was emailed in by Stuart Grove. He's asking, right, as much as Budleia is a beautiful plant, and I get that, and you were mentioning it there, it is invasive. But why is it not on Schedule 9? I mean, his words is actually put in bracket. It's been a problem for 100 years. I think what you might need to explain is what is Schedule 9 first, just in case there's people who don't know it. But then as well, just advise why it's not on it.
Okay, so Schedule 9, we talk about the sort of Countryside and Wildlife Act. So Schedule 9 Part 2 of this Act, we have a list of what we call invasive plants. These are plants which you are not allowed to plant or grow in the wild. And once again, we use this term wild as being not the built environment. So literally sort of woodlands and stuff like that. So that list of plants actually has quite a lot of plants which are still being sold in garden centres. So we talk about Montbrita, we talk about Virginia creeper, false, and the sort of normal variant behind it. So there's sort of quite a lot of plants there. However, Budleia is not on that list. There are a couple of reasons, in my opinion, why. And once again, this is very much in my opinion. This is not sort of factual. It's lobbying, and it's a absolute pain to try and get any plant on that list. Maybe especially with Brexit and all these other bits and pieces of legislation which is going on. There's so much going on at this point in time. It's extremely hard to sort of get any plant on that list at all. Secondary to that, there are benefits to it. So it's known as the butterfly bush because it provides so much back to sort of butterflies and sort of within certain environments. So that may be another aspect of why it's not being looked at so hard. And sort of additionally to it, it's actually very easy to manage. Sort of cut it down, eco stub it, or just and sort of eco stub it, or just cut it down as a whole can stop it from spreading. So as much as it is invasive, it's extremely easy to manage. So maybe that might be another reason why behind it as well. Once again, these are my opinions. It's not factual, but I personally would love to see it sort of on Schedule 9 because, as I said, you walk down the street and all you see is Budleia growing out of brickwork. I would love to see people take responsibility for it. However, the likelihood of that happening, in my opinion, is extremely slim, especially within the near future.
Well, okay, interesting. Just kind of following on, just because we're talking about things on the list and not on the list. Mark Walsh posed a question over the course of the chat, and it was actually to do with a plant that I've never heard of, and you may have heard of it. It was called American dog violet. Have you heard of it?
So again, American
dog violet.
No, I'm going to be totally honest.
Well, there we go. No,
unless there's a different common term for it.
Yeah. Well, what he was actually asking was he had a lot of it in his garden, and he was asking the question if it was invasive or not. I mean, Mark, we don't pretend to have all the answers, and I mean it's a bit like the kind of shit that the why Budleia is not on Scheduled 9. Again, I think what Daniel actually mentioned there was just from our kind of opinion-wise, but we're always very open to the audience as well. And if you've got knowledge or ideas or reasons why these sort of things are classed as Scheduled 9, or if you even know the answer to is American dog violet invasive, then please do jump onto the chat and let us know. Share your knowledge. Tell us all. We're very keen to listen to everyone. So I tell you what, let's skip over that question.
I just want to make a note on that one though.
Mark, sorry, there you go.
Mark, if you used to ping me an email or sort of let Andy know, I will find out more about it and I will get back to you because it's another good learning curve for me as well.
Well, there you go, Mark. I've got your email address. I'll pass that across to to Daniel, and I'll let him get back to you. Daniel, I'm conscious of time here, guys. We're just going to be running over just a couple of minutes, so hopefully you will stay on. I'm going to pose 2 quick questions if you can be really fast with me.
Yep.
First question is from Donny. Donny, I apologise, I'm struggling to pronounce your surname, but they're asking if there is no pre-existing damage to a property, can Japanese knotweed still cause damage?
Okay, so the root system itself will unlikely cause damage because the idea of the root system, it gets in between them cracks, it grows, gets bigger, and then sort of exaggerates and then cracks. If you have mature crown material up against this sort of wall here, as it grows, it pushes pressure on the wall, and that's where it can start to cause damage. But however, if there is no pre-existing damage, the rhizome will not cause damage itself.
Okay. Well, last question. Last question comes from James Rucroft. How are root barriers installed if the plant is already in situ?
Okay. So if we are talking, say, for example, bamboo, there are a couple of ways which you can do it. So if, say, for example, you want to keep it within a certain area, which we already know is outside of that area, install your root barrier where you want to keep it contained. That way, that's in the ground, it's not going to get any further worse. You're highly likely maybe going to get some type of regrowth outside of that area because if that rhizome's already gone past it, that is what it is. That type of regrowth can be treated in several ways. You can either try and dig it out yourself and pull it out, or as it pops up, you can treat it with a herbicide. But at least that way, you've got that root barrier in place, and then it's not going to get any further. It's not going to get any worse beyond that point. You can just manage the rest of it.
Perfect. Well, moving on, guys. And Chris 1, you've just kind of posed a question with regards to the CPD and basis points for this. There hopefully will be, we haven't actually contacted basis, but typically any invasive weed or plant-based webinar we do after contacting them, they generally will give, I believe it's 1 basis point. So I'll tell you what, if you hold off on that one, I've got your email there, Chris. I will check along with Daniel and I'll come back to you on that one, but I'm pretty sure it will be a yes to that one.
Regards to that, so we have sort of sent off for it. We were just waiting on the the event code for it, and unfortunately we didn't get it in time for this to be able to give it to yourselves now.
Well, there you go. Daniel was in the know more than I was there, so hopefully that answers your question there, Chris. So guys, just before we kind of finish off, just in case you are looking for some further information or guidance, I just wanted to point you across to a couple of resources. Firstly, there's a wealth of information on our professional home owner help and guidance pages. All you really need to do is just go to the website. The link is up there. Yeah, if you're a homeowner, go to the homeowner side and go to the help and guidance section for invasive weeds. If you're a professional, similar, just go to the professional side and look for the guidance on invasive weed management, and you'll find a wealth of pages in there that even goes into specifics that if you're a gardener or a landscaper, tips and advice. If you're at construction sites, doing development, stuff that you can do there, just knock yourself out. There is also as well, we have a professional invasive weed technical library. Link is on the screen there as well, where you'll find a wealth of documents, and it's things such as codes of practices, management of a variety of invasive species, invasive plants and weeds. There's guidance, white papers, etc., just on there. But we also as well have now a library of CPD videos with a variety of helpful content. A lot of the stuff that was mentioned today, there's actually very specific CPD webinars on there. It's there for you. It's completely free. It's a great resource. Just jump onto it. And lastly, the replay of today's webinar, for everyone that's on here, it should be available to all in the next 24 hours or so. So just before we go, if you are really interested in learning more, as Daniel alluded to over the course of the webinar, there is a stack load of courses that are on the PCE website that you can make use of. All of the courses that I've got up here at the moment in time is only a little small variety of the courses available. I just want to kind of highlight our brand new course that we've literally just launched this week. herbaceous invasive weeds. It is more geared towards surveyors and people already in the industry, but if you want to expand your knowledge within non-woody based plants and basically gain more expertise to pass on to your clients, it is a course worthwhile going to. But there is, as I mentioned, a whole big variety of courses there. One that I would really point out to is if you really want to get a keen eye on picking up on invasive plants, I would certainly take a wee look at the invasive plant identification training. I put the link into the chat just for everyone. It will be in the show notes, but again, just simply go to the PCE website and you will be able to kind of see there for everyone. Just again, lastly, just want to say it is Invasive Species Week this week. We talked about it at the very beginning. We have been trying to push out as much information as possible just to all. There's a stack load of information out there. It's a great opportunity for everyone to learn and gain a little bit more knowledge, whether it be through going to the PCE website or whether to go to others. Just take this opportunity to just jump out there and just gain that little bit more knowledge that you didn't already have. And on that note, and on that flavour as well, the PCA International Invasive Week Conference, mentioned at the very beginning, coming up on the 24th of November. Programme will be up later on today. Encourage everyone to check it out. There is early bird tickets there available. It is extremely high, valuable and very cost-effective CPD for all, and it's just a great day. Check it out, guys. Again, I put links to both the Invasive Species Week stuff and also to the conference in the chat, and it also will be within the show notes. Lastly, but not least, next webinar that's coming up will be on the 29th of June. We're currently building it at the moment in time. It will be up and running tomorrow, but this time we are looking at surveying basements or below ground structures, key evaluation techniques. Look out for the link coming out on the replay email tomorrow. And guys, I apologise that we are slightly running over, but again, a big thank you to everyone that tuned in today. We really hope that it was really informative to you and you like what you heard. Daniel, a big thank you to yourself for sharing the knowledge and guidance to all. And lastly, to everyone, hopefully you have a lovely rest of the morning. Goodbye, everyone, and hopefully we see you on the next live broadcast.